You can learn everything about a neighborhood by the sound it makes at 5:30 in the morning. That's what my father used to tell me while we planted cedar hedges along the edge of our property one summer in 1998, both of us covered in dirt, sweat burning our eyes under the Texas heat. Back then, this place sounded peaceful. Sprinklers ticking across fresh grass, morning doves on the power lines, gravel crunching slow under pickup truck tires. 26 years later, I woke up to the scream of industrial hedge trimmers chewing through those same trees like chainsaws through wet cardboard. The sound ripped me out of bed before the sun even cleared the rooftops. I stepped onto my back patio barefoot, cold dew soaking into my socks, and the smell hit me instantly. Fresh-cut cedar, gasoline exhaust, mulch and shredded branches scattered across my lawn like somebody had detonated a green bomb overnight. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. Half my hedge line was gone. 14-foot cedar privacy hedges reduced to raw splintered stumps barely waist high. Thick branches lay piled across the flower beds my father built before he died. And standing there in a white windbreaker with a clipboard tucked under one arm, like she was supervising a prison yard, was Deborah Whitmore, HOA president, self-appointed queen of Willow Creek Estates. Her highlighted blonde hair barely moved in the wind while she pointed toward the remaining hedge section like a general directing artillery fire. "Take the rest down another foot," she called to the landscaping crew. "The neighborhood deserves visibility." One of the workers shut off his trimmer when he noticed me standing there. Silence hit hard after all that engine noise. Debbie turned slowly, fake smile already locked into place. The kind of smile realtors use right before they tell you your house needs another $100,000 in work. "Oh good," she said sweetly. "You're awake. We finally fixed your jungle." I could hear blood rushing in my ears. My father planted those hedges after my mother passed away from cancer. Every cedar tree marked another year we stayed in that house together. Every Saturday morning for nearly a decade smelled exactly like this. Dirt, sap, black coffee and thermoses sitting on the porch rail. Debbie had no idea what she'd just destroyed. Or maybe she did. That woman treated property lines like suggestions and privacy like a personal insult. 3 months earlier, she'd started sending violation notices about excessive vegetation height. Then came complaints about root systems affecting neighborhood aesthetics. Then warnings about blocked sight lines lowering property values. Same recycled HOA garbage every suburban tyrant hides behind when they want control over something that doesn't belong to them. I looked down at the shredded cedar branches scattered across my boots, then over at the landscaping trailer parked beside the curb. Fresh concrete dust coated the tailgate from another job site. Funny thing about concrete, guys, we notice foundations. We notice measurements. We notice boundaries. And standing there in the cold morning air with the smell of ruined cedar filling my lungs, I realized something Debbie Whitmore never understood about men like me. What can be cut down? Concrete lasts forever. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up cedar branches in complete silence while the landscaping crew packed their equipment and rolled out of the neighborhood like they had just finished another routine maintenance job. The smell stayed everywhere. Sharp, bitter, fresh sap soaked into my gloves while sawdust clung to my jeans and boots. Every time I dragged another shredded branch toward the curb, I could hear my father's voice in the back of my head telling me to square the roots before planting or the trees would grow crooked. Funny the things grief remembers. The sun had fully come up by then, casting long shadows across the ruined hedge line, and for the first time since buying this house after the divorce, the entire backyard felt exposed. Wide open. Vulnerable. Debbie got exactly what she wanted. Visibility. I leaned against the porch railing with dirt under my fingernails and looked straight through the gaps where 14 feet of cedar privacy used to stand. Across the property line sat Deborah Whitmore's backyard paradise in full suburban glory. White stone patio. Oversized fire pit nobody actually used. Stainless steel outdoor kitchen polished like a dealership showroom. Everything perfect. Everything staged. Even her lawn looked fake, trimmed so evenly it resembled green carpet stretched over concrete. That woman treated the neighborhood like her own private country club. And the worst part? Most people let her. Willow Creek Estates had become one of those communities where neighbors stopped acting like neighbors and started acting like unpaid employees terrified of violating imaginary standards. The smell of chlorine drifted from somebody's pool, while automatic sprinklers clicked across identical front yards up and down the street. Beige houses, white SUVs, flagstone mailboxes. Every driveway looked like a real estate brochure. Except mine. My place still looked lived in. My old Ford F-250 sat dusty beside the garage. Concrete bags stacked near the side fence from a retaining wall project I finished last month. Wind chimes hanging from the porch my father built by hand 20 years ago. Debbie hated all of it because it reminded her she could not control everything she saw. I first met her 6 months after moving in. She showed up carrying a lemon pie and a violation notice at the same time. That should have told me everything. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said with that polished smile, while explaining my driveway gravel color was technically non-compliant with updated community aesthetics. Gravel color. I remember standing there holding the pie plate while diesel exhaust from my truck drifted through the air and realizing this woman had probably never built a single thing in her entire life. People like Debbie always talk about maintaining standards while standing on foundations built by men they would never invite to dinner. My father used to say concrete work teaches you more about people than construction. Everybody loves walls until they realize what they are keeping out. By noon, I had the remaining cedar stumps lined up in neat piles near the curb. Sap coated my palms sticky as glue. Sweat darkened the back of my shirt despite the cool morning air. Across the fence line, Debbie stepped outside holding a glass of iced tea like she was admiring landscaping at a country club. Then she smiled at me. Actually smiled. "Much better already," she called across the yard. "Now people can finally see the neighborhood properly." I looked past her toward the decorative stone entrance monument sitting at the end of the cul-de-sac. Willow Creek Estates. Elegant living starts here. Big limestone sign. Expensive uplighting. Perfect visibility from every angle. At least for now. The next violation notice arrived taped to my front door at exactly 7:03 the following morning. Not mailed. Not emailed. Taped directly to the glass like some kind of suburban eviction warning. The paper fluttered in the warm breeze while I stood there holding a mug of black coffee, still smelling faint traces of cedar sap baked into my work gloves hanging near the garage. Property remediation incomplete, it read in bold letters across the top. Below that came 3 separate violations. Remaining root structures creating visual obstruction. Excessive organic debris accumulation. Unapproved landscaping restoration activity. I actually laughed. Quiet at first. Then loud enough the sound bounced off the empty hedge line behind me. Debbie was fining me because her own crew destroyed my property less than 24 hours earlier. The woman had built an entire personality around manufactured authority. I folded the paper slowly and looked across the street where old Mr. Holloway was pretending to wash his truck while clearly watching my reaction. The second he noticed me looking his way, he dropped his eyes toward the sponge in his hand like a teenager caught cheating on a test. Nobody in Willow Creek wanted to get involved. That was Debbie's real power. Fear. Not legal fear. Social fear. The fear of becoming the next target. Around noon, I drove to the county records office downtown with the windows down and concrete dust still coating the dashboard from work. Heat shimmered above the highway while old country music crackled through the speakers. I kept thinking about the way Debbie smiled while those hedge trimmers tore through 14 years of growth. Not anger. Satisfaction. Like she finally corrected a flaw she had been staring at too long. The county building smelled exactly like every government office in Texas. Burnt coffee. Old paper. Cheap air freshener struggling against humidity. I pulled copies of my original property survey and easement records from 2001, spreading them across a metal table beneath fluorescent lights that hummed overhead like insects. That was when I noticed something strange. The measurements along the western property line did not match the current HOA landscaping layout. At first I figured it was a drafting error. Then I pulled the updated subdivision expansion plans filed 7 years earlier. My fingers stopped moving. The decorative stone monument at the entrance of Willow Creek Estates sat almost 32 inches inside my legal property boundary. 32 inches. Their prized neighborhood entrance sign. The uplighting. The irrigation line. Even part of the flower bed edging. All of it crossed onto my land. The metallic taste of adrenaline hit the back of my throat instantly. I leaned back in the chair slowly while the air conditioner rattled overhead. Suddenly, every violation notice made sense. Every complaint about visibility. Every demand to trim the hedges lower. Debbie never cared about aesthetics. My hedge line blocked visibility to the monument sign from the main road. The sign she bragged about at every HOA meeting. The sign she used in real estate brochures. The sign technically sitting on land she did not own. I stared at the survey map for nearly 10 minutes without speaking. Then I noticed something even better. According to county setback code, any permanent structure built directly along my legal property line could legally extend 8 feet high with approved permits because my lot backed against a designated drainage easement. Concrete retaining walls qualified. Privacy walls qualified too. Outside the records office, the afternoon heat felt thick enough to chew. I stood beside my truck listening to traffic hiss past on hot asphalt while cicadas screamed from nearby oak trees. Then my phone buzzed. Another HOA email from Debbie. Subject line, final notice before escalation. I smiled for the first time all week. Concrete takes time to cure properly. But once it sets, moving it becomes everybody else's problem. By Friday afternoon, the entire neighborhood could feel something shifting, even if nobody understood exactly what it was yet. You could sense it in the way curtains moved when my truck drove past, in the sudden silence during evening dog walks, in the way people avoided standing too close to Debbie during her usual patrols around the cul-de-sac. Fear changes shape when somebody finally stops bending to it. I spent most of that morning at the county permitting office wearing work boots still dusted gray from a commercial retaining wall project across town. The permit clerk recognized my company logo immediately. Concrete guys tend to know each other in this county because every flood season turns half the city into emergency contractors overnight. The office smelled like printer toner and rain-soaked jackets because a storm front had rolled in overnight, coating everything outside in thick Gulf humidity. Ceiling fans spun lazily overhead while I spread survey maps across the counter. The clerk adjusted his glasses, studied the paperwork, then let out a low whistle. "That entrance sign is really sitting on your property?" he asked quietly. "About 32 inches worth," I answered. He looked back down at the measurements again and shook his head slowly. "Well," he muttered, stamping the application forms one by one, "that is going to ruin somebody's week." The sound of those permit stamps hitting paper felt strangely satisfying. Sharp, official, permanent. By the time I got home, thunderheads had turned the sky dark purple over Willow Creek Estates. Wind pushed dead cedar needles across the driveway while the smell of rain mixed with fresh concrete dust drifting from the open bed of my truck. Debbie was already waiting near the curb like she had radar for anything threatening her authority. White capri pants. Clipboard tucked under one arm. Phone in the other hand. "I heard you have been spreading misinformation downtown," she said before I even stepped out of the truck. Her voice carried that fake calm people use right before panic starts leaking through the edges. I closed the truck door slowly. "County records are public information, Debbie." Her jaw tightened almost invisibly. "That monument sign belongs to the community." "Interesting wording," I replied. "Because according to the survey, the land underneath it belongs to me." The silence after that lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt much longer. Wind rattled the loose hedge branches piled near the curb, while distant thunder rolled somewhere west of town. Debbie recovered fast, though. Women like her always do. "You are not actually planning to make an issue out of this, are you?" she asked with a short, nervous laugh. "That sign improves everyone's property values." There it was again. Property values. The suburban religion people hide behind when they want control over something that was never theirs to begin with. I looked past her toward the entrance monument standing tall beneath expensive landscape lighting. Limestone columns. Decorative ironwork. Perfectly trimmed flower beds. 7 years of HOA newsletters bragging about that sign like it was the gates to Buckingham Palace. "You destroyed 14 years of privacy over visibility," I said calmly. Turns out visibility works both ways. Rain started falling then. Fat warm drops slapping against concrete and asphalt hard enough to release that earthy smell Texas roads get during summer storms. Debbie crossed her arms tighter. "If you interfere with community property, the HOA legal team will respond aggressively." I almost smiled hearing that because people threaten lawsuits when they think paperwork scares you. Concrete contractors spend half their lives buried in permits, inspections, engineering codes, and liability waivers. Fear leaves your system after enough years dealing with county inspectors carrying clipboards bigger than your torso. You should probably read the survey before making more threats, I told her. Then I walked inside while thunder shook the windows overhead. An hour later, my phone buzzed with 3 separate HOA violation emails sent within 11 minutes. Excessive debris accumulation. Unauthorized construction materials visible from roadway. Potential property modification concerns. I sat at the kitchen table listening to rain hammer the roof, while wet cedar smell still lingered in the air from the destroyed hedge line outside. Then I opened my contractor contact list and started making calls. Construction trucks sound different before sunrise. Deeper, heavier, the kind of rumble you feel through the floor before you hear it through the windows. At exactly 3:47 Saturday morning, the first diesel engine rolled into Willow Creek Estates under a sky still black enough to swallow the neighborhood whole. I was already outside wearing work boots and a reflective jacket, coffee steaming from a thermos balanced on the tailgate of my truck, while portable floodlights washed the property line in harsh white light. The air smelled like wet dirt and motor oil after last night's storm. Rebar cages sat stacked beside the driveway. Wooden forms lined the edge where the hedges used to stand. Fresh survey stakes marked every inch of legal boundary in bright orange paint. Concrete work does not care about feelings. It cares about measurements. By 4:15, the second truck arrived carrying the mixer trailer. Hydraulic brakes hissed in the darkness while backup alarms echoed through the sleeping cul-de-sac loud enough to wake every homeowner within 2 blocks. Porch lights started flickering on one by one across the neighborhood. Curtains shifted. Garage doors cracked open. People stepped outside in robes and slippers holding coffee mugs like confused witnesses at a parade nobody warned them about. Then came the sound I had been waiting for. Debbie's back door slamming open hard enough to echo across the yards. She marched through the wet grass in a pale pink tracksuit with her phone already pressed against her ear. Even from 30 feet away, I could smell expensive perfume mixing awkwardly with diesel exhaust and fresh concrete dust. "What in God's name is happening?" she snapped, heels sinking into the soft ground near the destroyed hedge line. I checked my watch calmly. Foundation pour starts at 5. Her eyes widened when she saw the county permit packet clipped to the temporary site fence. "You cannot build a structure here without HOA approval." One of my foremen, Luis, kept adjusting the rebar supports without even looking up. Metal clanged sharply against metal while generators hummed behind us. I handed Debbie a laminated copy of the approved county permits. "Actually," I said quietly, "county supersedes HOA jurisdiction on structural retaining walls attached to drainage easements." The silence after that was beautiful. Not quiet exactly. The construction site stayed loud with engines rumbling and compressors hissing steam into the cool morning air. But Debbie herself went completely silent, staring down at the paperwork like it had personally betrayed her. Then she saw the height specifications. 8 feet. "This is retaliation," she hissed finally. "No," I replied. "This is a boundary." By sunrise, the trench footings were already poured. Wet concrete spread smooth and gray beneath the floodlights while steam rose faintly into the cold morning air. The smell took me straight back to being 17 years old working beside my father on commercial parking lots during summer break. Cement dust in your lungs. Steel vibrating under your gloves. Honest work loud enough to drown out every unnecessary conversation. Across the street, neighbors had started gathering in small nervous groups pretending to walk dogs, while openly watching Debbie unravel in real time. She kept making phone calls, pacing circles across her patio. HOA board members. City inspectors. Probably attorneys too. None of it mattered now because the permits were valid, the surveys were certified, and the property line belonged to me. Around 8 o'clock, a county inspection truck pulled into the subdivision. White pickup. Official seal on the door. Debbie straightened instantly when she saw it, probably expecting rescue. But Inspector Hanley stepped out holding a clipboard and walked directly toward the entrance monument instead of the construction site. He studied the survey stakes carefully, measured the stone columns twice, then frowned hard enough to crease his entire forehead. "Well," he muttered loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear, "that sign is definitely not where they said it was." I looked over at Debbie standing frozen beside her flower beds while the first concrete wall panels started rising behind me inch by inch into the Texas morning sky. Concrete walls changed the sound of a neighborhood. That was the first thing everybody noticed by Sunday afternoon. Noise that used to drift freely across backyards suddenly stopped dead against smooth gray surfaces. Lawnmowers sounded farther away. Barking dogs echoed differently. Even the wind felt quieter standing near the new wall sections curing under the hot Texas sun. The smell of wet cement still hung heavy in the air while sprinklers clicked uselessly against fresh concrete where Debbie's precious visibility corridor used to be. By then, the wall stretched nearly 70 feet along the property line, solid and clean with reinforced footing buried deep below the drainage easement. 8 feet tall exactly. Perfectly legal. Perfectly permanent. And directly in front of the Willow Creek Estate's monument sign. You could still see the very top of the limestone columns from certain angles near the main road, but the elegant view Debbie obsessed over for years was gone behind smooth gray concrete and shadow lines. It looked less like an upscale neighborhood entrance now and more like somebody had built a fortress in the middle of suburbia. Honestly, I was proud of it. Around 2 in the afternoon, another county vehicle rolled into the subdivision, this time followed by a utility contractor truck carrying orange safety cones and underground line detection equipment. Apparently, Inspector Hamley's measurements triggered something bigger than Debbie expected. Turns out the HOA irrigation system supplying water to the entrance landscaping also crossed my property without an easement permit. Same for portions of the low-voltage lighting cable feeding those decorative uplights Debbie loved showing off during Christmas tours. Men in reflective vests spent hours marking underground lines with bright spray paint while neighbors gathered near mailboxes pretending not to stare. The entire front entrance area looked like a utility accident scene by sunset. Debbie spent most of that afternoon pacing across her patio with sunglasses on even though the sky stayed cloudy. She stopped smiling completely. No more fake sweetness. No more polished neighborhood queen routine. Just tight shoulders and angry silence every time another county official stepped onto the property, carrying clipboards. At one point, she stormed toward the wall while my crew was smoothing a section near the corner footing. "You have made your point," she snapped. "This has gone far enough." Louise kept working the trowel across wet concrete without even looking at her. Scrape. Smooth. Scrape. Smooth. I stepped down from the temporary scaffold, wiping dust from my hands. "You cut down 14 years of privacy because you wanted a better view of a sign." Debbie folded her arms immediately. "That sign represents the community." "No," I said calmly. "It represents control." The silence after that felt thick as storm clouds. Somewhere farther down the block, a garage door rattled open while kids rode bicycles in nervous circles pretending not to listen. Debbie glanced toward the growing crowd of neighbors near the sidewalk and lowered her voice. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to property values?" There it was again. Always property values. Never respect. Never boundaries. Never accountability. Just resale numbers and appearances. I looked back toward the wall panels curing behind me under the afternoon heat. Concrete darkened slightly where moisture evaporated into the air. Strong. Permanent. Unapologetic. "Funny thing about property values," I replied. "They usually drop when buyers discover the HOA built half its entrance illegally." Debbie's face lost color instantly. Real fear finally replacing arrogance for the first time since this whole mess started. Because deep down she already knew what came next. County audits. Easement inspections. Permit reviews. Questions from homeowners paying thousands in annual dues for landscaping technically sitting on somebody else's land. By Monday morning, the neighborhood group chat exploded with screenshots, rumors, and blurry photos of county inspectors measuring the monument sign, while my concrete wall towered behind them like a giant gray receipt nobody could ignore anymore. And for the first time since moving into Willow Creek Estates, people stopped whispering about Debbie behind closed doors and started asking questions out loud. Tuesday night was the first HOA board meeting Debbie had held in almost 2 years, where people showed up angry instead of obedient. You could feel the tension before I even walked into the clubhouse. The parking lot overflowed onto the curb with SUVs and pickup trucks lined bumper to bumper under buzzing streetlights, while humid evening air carried the smell of fresh mulch and overheated engines across the subdivision. Usually those meetings felt like stage performances. Same board members. Same fake smiles. Same discussions about mailbox paint and holiday decoration deadlines. Not this time. This time people came carrying printed screenshots and county notices folded in their hands. The clubhouse itself smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaning spray when I stepped inside wearing work boots still dusted white from the wall installation. Conversation stopped almost instantly. 30 or 40 people packed into metal folding chairs beneath fluorescent lights that hummed overhead loud enough to make the silence feel heavier. Debbie sat at the front table beside the other HOA board members wearing a navy blazer and pearl earrings like she thought dressing professionally could somehow reverse reality. But her eyes looked tired now, sharp around the edges. The kind of tired that comes from losing control one small piece at a time. She started the meeting with her usual polished voice. We are currently addressing several temporary misunderstandings regarding county zoning interpretations. Temporary misunderstandings. That phrase almost made me laugh out loud. Half the neighborhood had spent 48 hours reading county violation reports online. People knew exactly what was happening now. One homeowner near the back stood up immediately. Did the HOA really build the entrance sign on private property? Another voice followed before Debbie could answer. Are our dues paying for illegal landscaping? Then another. Why were there no easement approvals filed? The room erupted after that. Not yelling exactly. Worse. Frustration. Real frustration from people realizing the woman policing grass height for years somehow forgot basic property law when it benefited her own projects. Debbie kept trying to regain control, tapping a pen sharply against the table while sweat slowly darkened the collar of her blazer under the harsh lights. The board acted in good faith based on previous survey assumptions, she snapped. This situation is being exaggerated by certain individuals. Every eye in the room shifted toward me. I stayed leaning quietly against the back wall beside the coffee station, arms crossed, listening to the sound of cheap air conditioning rattling through ceiling vents. Then old Mr. Holloway stood up from the second row holding printed copies of county records in his weathered hands. Same man who used to avoid eye contact every morning washing his truck. No offense, Debbie, he said slowly, but some of us are starting to wonder why his hedges were suddenly a problem right before all this got discovered. The silence after that landed like concrete. Heavy. Final. Debbie opened her mouth, but nothing came out for a second. And in that second, everybody saw it. The panic. The realization that the story she spent years controlling had finally escaped her hands. One of the board members beside her quietly removed his HOA nameplate from the table and slid it into his briefcase without saying a word. Another homeowner stood up near the front holding photographs of the landscaping crew cutting my hedge line. You told us this was approved maintenance work, she said. That was his private property. Debbie's composure cracked completely then. Those hedges violated visibility standards, she snapped too loudly. I was protecting community appearance. By trespassing? Somebody answered immediately from the back. More voices followed after that. Questions. Accusations. Anger building louder with every minute while the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and thunder rolled faintly outside through the humid Texas night. I never said a word the entire meeting. I did not need to. The wall outside already said everything for me. 8 feet of cured concrete, standing exactly where 14 years of privacy used to grow. Permanent proof of what happens when somebody mistakes quietness for weakness. The county removal notice arrived 3 days later, taped directly to the Willow Creek Estates monument sign for the entire neighborhood to see. Bright orange paper flapping against limestone columns under the Texas sun like a warning flag after a storm. Unauthorized encroachment. Non-compliant utility installation. Easement violation pending corrective action. Every homeowner driving through the entrance had to pass it. Every delivery driver saw it. Every realtor showing houses suddenly had to explain why the luxury neighborhood entrance looked like an active code enforcement scene. By then the wall had fully cured. Smooth charcoal gray concrete stretching across the property line, clean and straight, with cedar planter boxes installed along the inside edge facing my yard. The funny thing about concrete is people assume it feels cold until sunlight hits it in the afternoon and the entire surface radiates warmth back into the air. Standing beside it now felt peaceful, quiet, secure. No golf carts creeping past. No random HOA patrols staring into my backyard. No Debbie pretending visibility was more important than privacy. I was watering newly planted cedar saplings one evening when a black luxury SUV rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac and parked near the monument sign. 2 people stepped out wearing business clothes instead of county uniforms. HOA attorneys. You could spot them immediately by the polished shoes and expressions that always look mildly irritated by sunlight. One of them approached me carrying a leather folder while cicadas screamed from the oak trees overhead. "Mr. Cole," he began carefully, "the association would like to discuss a possible resolution." I kept watering the saplings without answering right away. Water hissed softly into the fresh soil, while wet earth smell drifted upward into the warm evening air. "Interesting," I finally said, "because last week your client threatened aggressive legal action." The attorney adjusted his tie uncomfortably. Certain misunderstandings escalated unnecessarily. There was that word again. Misunderstandings. Rich people love calling consequences misunderstandings after paperwork catches up to them. He opened the folder and explained the HOA wanted permission to temporarily access my property to relocate irrigation lines and partially dismantle the monument landscaping before county fines increased further. Apparently, daily penalties had already started accumulating. I almost admired the irony. Debbie spent years weaponizing fines against homeowners over mailbox colors and lawn edging. Now her own entrance project was bleeding money every 24 hours because she ignored property boundaries. "Access is possible," I replied calmly, "with signed contractor agreements, insurance verification, and temporary easement fees." The second attorney blinked hard. "Temporary easement fees? You charged homeowners administrative compliance fees for years," I said. "Seems fair." Neither man argued after that. They just exchanged exhausted looks like people suddenly realizing this situation was never going to return to normal. Because it could not. Not after the county reports. Not after the board meeting meltdown. Not after half the neighborhood finally understood how much authority Debbie only pretended to have. By the following week, crews started dismantling portions of the entrance landscaping under county supervision. Decorative flower beds disappeared first. Then irrigation lines. Then sections of stone edging near the property boundary. Every morning construction noise echoed through the subdivision while residents slowed their cars to watch the slow public unraveling of Debbie's prized neighborhood showcase. And through all of it, the wall stayed exactly where it was. Solid, silent, immovable. One afternoon, I caught Debbie standing alone beside the stripped-down monument entrance, staring at the concrete barrier blocking the view she fought so hard to protect. Wind pushed loose hair across her face while traffic hissed faintly from the nearby road beyond the subdivision gates. She looked smaller somehow, without an audience around her. Tired, embarrassed, human for the first time since I met her. She noticed me watching from my driveway, but did not say a word. Neither did I, because sometimes the loudest victory is silence backed by 8 feet of reinforced concrete. 6 months later, the cedar saplings behind the wall had already grown nearly 3 feet tall. Young branches swayed softly above the concrete line every morning while sunlight filtered through fresh green needles carrying that same sharp cedar smell I remembered from childhood. Some mornings I would sit on the back patio before work with black coffee warming my hands, listening to nothing but birds and distant traffic beyond the subdivision. No golf carts creeping past the fence line anymore. No violation notices taped to my door. No clipboard shadows moving across my windows. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind my father always said money could never buy, because real peace only exists where boundaries are respected. Willow Creek Estates looked different now too. Smaller somehow. Less polished. The monument entrance eventually got rebuilt farther back from the road after months of county reviews and contractor work. Simpler design this time. No oversized limestone columns. No dramatic uplighting. No decorative flower beds spilling across property lines pretending ownership worked like decoration. Funny enough, the neighborhood survived just fine without all of it. Property values never crashed either despite all Debbie's warnings. In fact, several houses sold faster once buyers realized the HOA board had finally been audited and restructured. Turns out people prefer neighborhoods with fewer self-appointed dictators running around measuring grass with rulers. Debbie resigned from the HOA board 3 weeks after the county settlement finalized. Officially, she cited personal stress and family priorities. Unofficially, nobody trusted her anymore. Once people see how authority behaves when challenged, they never fully unsee it. The white Lexus stopped patrolling the neighborhood after that. No more fake smiles at mailbox clusters. No more passive-aggressive newsletters about community standards. About 2 months later, a moving truck appeared outside her house early one humid Saturday morning. I watched from my driveway, while workers loaded patio furniture and decorative planters into the trailer beneath, gray storm clouds rolling over the subdivision. The smell of rain and cardboard drifted through the air, while cicadas screamed from the trees lining the street. Debbie noticed me standing there eventually. For a second I thought she might walk over and say something after all this time. Maybe apologize. Maybe argue one last time. Instead, she just looked toward the wall running along the property line between our yards. Her eyes lingered on the young cedar trees growing behind smooth gray concrete, exactly where the old hedge line used to stand. Then she climbed into her SUV and drove away without a word. I never saw her again after that. A week later, old Mr. Holloway wandered over while I was sealing expansion joints near the driveway. He leaned against the fence sipping coffee from a faded thermos and nodded toward the wall. "You know," he said slowly, "most people around here thought you were overreacting at first." Concrete dust coated my gloves while warm wind carried fresh-cut grass smell through the neighborhood. "And now?" I asked. He chuckled quietly. "Now people lock their gates less and mind their own business more." I looked across the subdivision where kids rode bicycles beneath oak trees and neighbors actually waved at each other again instead of peeking through blinds waiting for violation letters. Funny how fear disappears once somebody finally stands up to it. The wall itself had already started blending into the landscape by then. Cedar shadows stretched across the concrete every evening while vines slowly climbed portions near the far corner. Strong things eventually become part of the environment, permanent enough that people stop questioning why they exist and simply accept them as necessary. My father used to say every structure tells a story about the people who built it. Some walls keep danger out, some keep peace in, and some get built because one entitled person forgot the difference between community and control. She thought privacy was something she could cut down with a landscaping crew and a clipboard. Turns out boundaries are a lot harder to remove once they are poured in concrete.